Look down the concrete canyon of this city block through a thermal radio frequency lens. You do not see people. You see active beacons. Zoom in on a single pedestrian staring at a screen. A thick, glowing digital tether extends from their device, slicing straight up past the glass and steel of the skyscrapers. That signal is not reaching a local antenna. It connects directly to an unmarked Cessna aircraft circling in the dark 2 miles above the pavement. The cell tower is flying. Right now, as you hold your device, it is blindly screaming its unique identification code into the void, begging for a handshake. This is not a glitch. It is an engineered dependency. Your hardware is programmed to inherently trust the strongest signal in its immediate vicinity. Because of this blind obedience, your exact coordinates, your private contacts, and your personal texts are actively being harvested from the sky without a warrant. Ignorance of this invisible architecture makes you a permanent target in a dragnet you cannot see, touch, or legally challenge. We are going to execute a meticulous forensic teardown of this surveillance infrastructure, internally classified as Dirtbox technology. By analyzing the structural flaws of modern telecommunications, you will understand the exact mathematical vulnerabilities that allow this aerial phantom to operate entirely outside the boundaries of the law. Strip away the sleek glass casing of your device and push the lens deep into the logic board. Down here, at the microscopic level of the baseband processor, graphical overlays display thousands of binary requests firing outward like frantic radar pulses. We are looking at the foundational crime scene. In a stark, windowless interrogation room, our open-source intelligence analyst drops a thick, heavy file labeled IMSI protocol onto a cold steel table. To the analyst, the smartphone is not a communication tool. It is a compromised informant that actively testifies against its owner. They flip open the dossier pointing to the baseline architecture of global cellular networks. Your hardware operates on a continuous, desperate loop. Millisecond by millisecond, it is constantly scanning the local radio spectrum, relentlessly searching for the base station emitting the highest possible transmission power. This continuous search requires a form of identification, a digital passport presented to the network. Embedded deep within the silicon of your SIM card is the International Mobile Subscriber Identity, or IMSI. This is a unique 15-digit number hard-coded into the chip. It is the absolute cryptographic equivalent of your physical DNA. Every time your phone pinged a tower today, it handed over that 15-digit sequence, logging your existence into a permanent corporate database. But the vulnerability lies in motion. As you walk down a street, the signal from your current cell tower naturally degrades. When a new, stronger radio signal appears on the horizon, the device executes an automated handover protocol. Without asking for your permission, and without a single notification on your screen, the internal modem seamlessly drops its current carrier connection to violently latch onto the new, more powerful transmission source. The protocol assumes that any tower broadcasting a powerful, recognizable network signal is legitimate and trustworthy. The system demands no immediate proof of identity from the hardware receiving your data. This is the mathematical oversight, the blind spot in the code that intelligence agencies have ruthlessly weaponized. The investigator taps a photograph of a ruggedized metal server rack, the hardware manifestation of this exploit. Ground-based simulators, commonly known in law enforcement circles as stingrays, exploit this exact handover protocol. They do not hack into your phone through complex software infiltration. They simply leverage the rules of physics and radio frequency. By deploying a mobile antenna and broadcasting a signal slightly stronger than the legitimate commercial towers in the area, the Stingray essentially impersonates the network infrastructure. It is a digital man-in-the-middle attack happening right on the street corner. The simulator screams louder than the authentic infrastructure, and your phone obeys its foundational programming. It drops the secure connection of your service provider and connects directly to the police surveillance van parked down the block. The hardware strips away your privacy simply by manipulating the basic physics of signal amplification. But a van parked on a physical street has severe logistical limitations. It is blocked by concrete, disrupted by competing radio interference, and restricted to a localized catchment area. The investigator slides a new photograph across the steel table, this one showing an aviation hangar. To cast a dragnet over an entire metropolitan grid, the architects of this system realized they had to elevate the lie. They had to take the impersonation into the sky. The anomaly we saw 2 miles above the city is not a localized incident. It is standard operating procedure. When the simulator is suspended in the atmosphere, free from ground-level obstructions, it becomes the dominant voice in the radio spectrum for thousands of square miles. The system scales from tracking a single device to capturing an entire population in one sweeping maneuver. The architecture of mass extraction relies entirely on the design of the victim. The intelligence analyst closes the thick protocol file. The evidence trail is undeniable, written into the very firmware you rely on daily. The telecommunications industry sold you the illusion of a secure point-to-point tunnel between you and your intended recipient. But the mathematical reality of the hardware proves that the network was designed to be porous, prioritizing seamless connectivity over absolute cryptographic security. We are dealing with a machine that inherently lacks allegiance. It does not care about the encryption standard of the app you are using because the vulnerability exists at the baseband level, a layer of execution over which you have absolutely zero administrative control. The surveillance apparatus simply exploits a feature that was intentionally built into the global standard. You are the unknowing accomplice in your own digital tracking. The ultimate realization of this digital forensics audit is a terrifying truth about the device sitting in your pocket right now. Your phone is engineered to be deeply and fundamentally disloyal to you. It will gladly abandon a secure, legitimate carrier connection the exact moment a louder, unverified voice enters the room. And from 10,000 feet in the air, the government is shouting. The echo of that shout does not come from a marked police van idling on your street corner. To intercept a city-sized volume of data, the architecture of surveillance had to break free from the constraints of concrete and urban interference. Through the eyes of an aerospace forensics expert standing in a freezing, dust-filled aviation hangar at night, the physical evolution of this dragnet becomes chillingly clear. A narrow flashlight beam cuts through the dark, methodically tracing the underbelly of a heavily modified Cessna 206 aircraft. The beam stops dead on an abnormal rectangular fiberglass pod bolted directly to the fuselage. This is not standard aviation equipment. If your objective is to cast a dragnet over an entire metropolitan grid, you cannot operate from a parked vehicle. You must fundamentally claim the high ground. The forensic investigator runs a gloved hand over the cold fiberglass housing, reading the engineering logic written into its mounting brackets. Ground-based signal interception is a chaotic, localized game of cat and mouse, constantly disrupted by steel-framed buildings and competing radio towers. To guarantee total spectrum dominance, the interceptor must eliminate every physical obstacle between the transmitter and the target. The turning point in this covert arms race occurred in the year 2014. Classified flight logs and procurement records reveal a massive operational shift when federal agencies realized the mathematical limitations of street-level hardware. They began aggressively mounting advanced cell site simulators, specifically manufactured by a defense contractor known as Digital Receiver Technology, directly into the airframes of civilian light aircraft. Inside the intelligence community, these airborne units quickly earned a cynical internal operational moniker. Borrowing the manufacturer's acronym, operatives simply referred to this hardware as Dirtboxes. The name perfectly encapsulates the blunt, indiscriminate nature of the machine. It is a piece of military-grade eavesdropping technology masquerading as a localized cell tower, weaponized against a domestic population. The expert reviews a thick binder of wiring diagrams spread across the hangar floor, tracing the massive power draw of the Dirtbox. This is not a passive listening device. It is a highly aggressive transmitter. By pushing this hardware into the sky, the operator weaponizes the very protocol we exposed earlier. The altitude completely rewrites the mathematical equation determining which cell tower your smartphone decides to trust. Cruising at an operational altitude of exactly 10,000 feet, the Cessna becomes a ghost node with an unparalleled vantage point. From this precise elevation, a single Dirtbox casts an invisible, downward-facing radio net with a staggering diameter of roughly 5 square miles. Within that massive circular footprint, the natural geometry of the urban landscape is rendered entirely irrelevant to the radio frequency. By taking to the sky, the device effortlessly bypasses all ground-level interference, from skyscrapers to natural topography. Because there is absolutely nothing blocking the transmission path between the aircraft and the ground below, the Dirtbox guarantees that it is the single strongest signal available to thousands of civilian devices simultaneously. The trap is set, and it covers entire neighborhoods in one sweep. Analyze the sheer volume of data existing within a 5-square-mile radius of a major city. Tens of thousands of smartphones, completely unaware of the threat above, suddenly detect a pristine, overwhelmingly powerful connection. Following their hard-coded programming to seek the best signal, they instantly sever their ties to legitimate telecommunication carriers and blindly handshake with the fiberglass pod bolted to the Cessna. Looking at the schematic of the antenna array, the forensic investigator understands the true, chilling efficiency of the system. The aircraft does not need to know where a specific target is hiding. It simply flies a broad geometric grid over the city, vacuuming up the digital identities of every man, woman, and child within its operational shadow. It is an algorithmic dragnet, pulling everything out of the digital ocean. Down on the ground, the victims remain completely oblivious. You look at your screen, and you see full reception bars. Your text messages still send, your phone calls still connect, and your web browser still loads. But the reality is that your entire digital life is now being routed through a covert government proxy server orbiting directly over your roof. The illusion of a secure connection is flawlessly maintained. Because the hardware leaves absolutely no malicious software on your device, performing a digital autopsy on a compromised phone yields zero evidence of the breach. The crime scene does not exist in the code. It exists solely in the airspace. The aircraft itself, leaking aviation fuel and radiating heat in this freezing hangar, is the only physical proof that a mass constitutional violation has just occurred. The flashlight clicks off, plunging the hangar back into darkness. We have proven how the net is cast, and we have proven the terrifying scale of its reach. But establishing the physical infrastructure of the Dirtbox is only the first piece of this dark puzzle. The true horror lies in exactly what happens to those thousands of innocent devices during the crucial milliseconds they are held hostage by the phantom node in the sky. The previous file ended in a freezing aviation hangar, pondering the fate of those hijacked devices. Now, look at the severe, top-down tactical map illuminating this monitor. It represents a standard urban grid at rush hour. You are tracking a single, high-value suspect moving through the congested arteries of the city, represented by a solitary red dot on the digital display. The objective seems straightforward. Locate that specific radio frequency signature among the overwhelming metropolitan noise. But the geometry of radio waves does not allow for a sniper's precision. Suddenly, a massive, pulsating, circular wave washes over the digital grid, emanating from the aircraft we just analyzed in the hangar. The tactical screen fundamentally changes. Instantly, 60,000 innocent gray dots light up red as their encrypted data is swept up alongside the primary target. The collateral damage is no longer theoretical. It is rendered entirely visible on the tactical map. To catch a single suspect in a sprawling city of millions, the mathematical reality dictates that you must intercept absolutely everyone. As an investigator analyzing this digital crime scene, I find the sheer volume of the catch staggering. The protocol is inherently indiscriminate. You are conditioned to think of surveillance as a surgical wiretap placed carefully on a single line. But the transaction occurring above you operates under a completely different paradigm. It is a wholesale acquisition of data. The airborne simulator does not surgically target a single phone. It functions as an uncompromising digital vacuum. By broadcasting the most dominant control signal in the airspace, it forces a mandatory connection with every single active device within its massive 5-mile footprint. It creates a localized, invisible blackout of all legitimate telecommunication networks. There is no opt-out clause in your cellular contract for this event. Your device firmware registers the superior signal strength and obeys its hard-coded mandate to switch over. In doing so, you hand your digital identity over to a federal proxy. You become a data point in a sweeping dragnet, caught in an algorithmic net cast from an altitude of 10,000 feet. The numbers logged in these flight manifests are horrifying in their scale. During a standard, routine operational flight, a single Dirtbox can intercept the registration data of tens of thousands of innocent citizens. The entire operational motive behind this massive collateral harvest is just to locate one specific 15-digit international mobile subscriber identity. Analyze the profound asymmetry of this operation. The surveillance database absorbs the unique hardware identifiers, the exact geospatial coordinates, and the real-time routing metadata of entire neighborhoods. Business professionals, paramedics, and families, 60,000 lives are momentarily seized and interrogated by a centralized algorithm looking for a single match. From a forensic standpoint, the processing power required to execute this dragnet is a masterclass in aggressive engineering. The system cannot afford to hold these 60,000 devices hostage indefinitely. Doing so would cause a catastrophic failure of the municipal communications grid and immediately alert the public and the local carriers to the aerial intrusion. To maintain the illusion of normalcy, the airborne server executes a ruthless digital triage. The system rapidly queries the thousands of connected devices simultaneously, scanning the digital crowd to isolate the target's unique number. Once the suspect is pinpointed, it drops the rest of the catch, releasing the thousands of non-target phones back to their legitimate carriers. This entire cycle of hijacking, interrogation, and release happens at blinding speed. For the 60,000 civilians caught in the sweep, the total duration of their captivity lasts only fractions of a second. The automated system dumps their connections back into the commercial network pool before the human brain can even register a delay in a pending text message. The dark brilliance of this architecture lies in its absolute stealth. This momentary interception leaves no trace whatsoever on the victim's screen. There are no dropped call notifications, no spinning loading icons, and no sudden dips in the reception bars. The hardware executes the mass extraction with zero physical evidence left behind on your personal device. If I were to confiscate your phone immediately after the plane flew overhead, my forensic analysis would yield nothing. The operating system simply records a standard tower handover, a routine alibi that happens hundreds of times a day as you move through a city. The constitutional violation is perfectly masked as standard, benign telecommunications maintenance. This is the perfect crime of the modern age. The evidence is continuously destroyed by the very protocols designed to keep the network functioning. As an analyst, watching the red dots fade back to gray on the tactical map, the realization is chilling. The surveillance state does not need to hack your individual phone. It simply built a vastly superior, counterfeit tower. The suspect is located, the collateral devices are released, and the aircraft continues its silent orbit in the dark. But acquiring the location data is merely the first layer of this systemic breach. I must now extract the encrypted payloads themselves. I need to examine what happens when the simulator decides to strip away the security protocols entirely. To extract those encrypted payloads, we have to look much closer at the digital crime scene. Sitting in front of this ruggedized military laptop, the glare of the command line interface is the only light in the room. We know thousands of devices are captured in the sky during those stolen milliseconds. But capturing the signal is just the physical breach. The real interrogation happens right here in the firmware, where the rules of digital trust are violently rewritten in real time. Watching these lines of code scroll aggressively across the terminal, a terrifying logic emerges. You buy the latest hardware, blindly trusting the unbreakable cryptography marketed to you by Silicon Valley. But your modern encryption is absolutely useless if an attacker can force your device to travel back in time to the 1990s. The code executing on this screen is not breaking your security vault. It is calmly convincing your phone that the vault no longer exists. The official protocol dictates a strict two-way verification process for any secure connection. Modern 4th and 5th generation cellular networks utilize a protocol known as mutual authentication. Think of it as a digital handshake where both parties check credentials. Not only does your phone have to prove who it is to the cell tower, but the tower is mathematically required to prove its legitimate identity back to your phone. But staring at the execution logs on this laptop, the fatal flaw in that architecture becomes glaringly obvious. The engineers who built these modern networks made a critical, historical assumption. They assumed the infrastructure would always move forward. They built a system that heavily relies on backward compatibility to prevent dropped calls in rural areas. That safety net is the exact vulnerability the airborne simulator exploits. The attack vector begins with a massive lie, broadcast from 10,000 feet. The cell site simulator deploys a malicious protocol command straight into the geographic footprint. It does not try to guess your complex encryption keys, which would take centuries. Instead, it forcefully instructs your device that all advanced high-security networks are currently unavailable. The Dirtbox essentially declares a localized digital state of emergency. Panic sets in at the silicon level. Your phone is programmed to maintain a connection to the grid at all costs. Desperate for a signal, the device aggressively downgrades its connection to legacy second-generation, or 2G, bands. This is the exact moment the screen flashes red on my terminal. We are witnessing a forced downgrade attack. Your high-end smartphone is suddenly operating on a standard ratified decades ago, long before modern security protocols were even theorized. Operating on that second-generation network, mutual authentication simply does not exist. The tower no longer has to prove its identity, and your encryption is stripped entirely, leaving your data completely naked. If this scale of systemic vulnerability blows your mind too, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We are dismantling a ghost network piece by piece, and you need to understand how deep this surveillance runs before we uncover the final layer. With the encryption neutralized, the firewall is permanently gone. The Dirtbox is now freely intercepting your unencrypted text messages and voice call metadata in real time. Every keystroke, every contact number, every geolocation ping is pulled directly into the command line interface. Watching the plain text spill across the terminal is like reading a private diary left wide open on a public bench. The extraction is totally frictionless. As an analyst tracking this digital paper trail, the elegance of the attack is almost insulting. The government did not need a sophisticated quantum computer to crack your advanced encryption. They just needed an antenna powerful enough to exploit the bureaucratic legacy of the telecommunications industry. The vulnerability was written into the foundational laws of the network. Your device is perfectly obeying the rules. It is the rules that are fundamentally compromised. I scroll back up through the terminal logs on the military laptop. The red error messages confirming the successful downgrade are stamped with precise, synchronized timestamps. Within 100 milliseconds, a secure device is blinded, dragged back to a 1994 security standard, strip-searched for its metadata, and violently shoved back onto the modern commercial network. The alibi is re-established before you even pull the phone from your pocket. Multiply that single transaction by the tens of thousands of devices caught in the 5-mile radius of the aircraft. It is a synchronized, automated mugging occurring in the radio frequency spectrum directly above our heads. The simulator acts as an invisible checkpoint, demanding digital identification from every citizen in the grid and exploiting a structural loophole to ensure absolutely no one can refuse the search. This completely shatters the illusion of secure consumer technology. The padlock icon on your browser or your secure messaging app is a comforting piece of theater. It implies a fortified perimeter. But what good is a heavily armored steel door if the entire foundation of the house can be instantaneously shifted into a swamp? The infrastructure itself is hostile, weaponized against the very users it was built to connect and protect. In any standard forensic investigation, you look for the anomaly, the unauthorized breach of protocol. But here, the protocol is the primary suspect. The Network Standards Committee mandated this fallback feature to guarantee service reliability at all times. The intelligence agencies simply weaponized that reliability. They turned the phone's deepest instinct, the mechanical desperation to stay connected, into the ultimate vector of betrayal. The screen of the ruggedized laptop reflects in the dark room, a steady stream of harvested metadata illuminating the silence. It is a pristine, bloodless crime scene. No broken glass, no tripped alarms, just a quiet compliance from thousands of machines surrendering their most intimate data to an unmarked ghost node in the sky. The transaction is fully authorized by the telecommunications system's own archaic logic. But even a digital ghost leaves a physical wake. While the internal software attack is completely invisible to the victim, the hardware executing the attack is firmly bound by the laws of gravity and aviation. To hold that localized blackout, the aircraft must physically loiter over the target area. And in the modern world, a plane circling endlessly in the dark sky is a massive, radiating anomaly, just waiting to be mathematically isolated. The OSINT analyst leans closer to the monitors, the harsh blue light of the screens reflecting off tired eyes. Dozens of browser windows clutter the workspace, a chaotic mosaic of live aviation data. The internal software attack on your phone might be perfectly silent, but the physical delivery system is deafeningly loud if you know how to listen. The ghost plane needs a physical anchor in the sky. To hold that invisible net over your neighborhood, a 3-ton machine must burn aviation fuel, fight crosswinds, and occupy physical airspace. The government's ghost planes are built to be invisible to the naked eye, operating miles above the cloud deck in the dead of night. But up there, in the cold upper atmosphere, they are screaming their exact coordinates into the radio spectrum. By international aviation law, every aircraft operating in crowded, modern airspace must announce its presence to avoid catastrophic collisions. This is done through an Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, or ADS-B transponder. It is a mandatory beacon, firing out the plane's altitude, heading, and unique identification code multiple times every single second. The analyst's cursor traces a neon green line across a stark black digital map of the urban grid. While commercial airliners leave clean, straight trajectories from point A to point B, this line is a tangled mess. It is an anomaly hiding in plain sight within open-source flight tracking databases, logged by thousands of independent radio antennas sitting on civilian rooftops. The digital trail reveals a small, unmarked aircraft flying highly unusual, repetitive orbital patterns at agonizingly low speeds. It is not traveling to a destination. It is loitering. The flight path looks like a tightly wound spool of thread dropped directly over a dense residential zone. This is the exact moment the hunter becomes the hunted on our radar. These orbits are not random. The analyst measures the diameter of the flight path on the screen, a strict, perfectly maintained 2-mile radius. The aircraft holds this exact geometric circle for 4 agonizing hours. This is not a holding pattern for a busy airport. It is the unmistakable mechanical signature of a Dirtbox calibrating its signal strength. To pinpoint a specific target on the ground, the airborne antenna must triangulate the phone's response time from multiple angles. By flying in a perfect circle, the system mathematically isolates the target's exact position down to a single room in an apartment building. The plane is literally drawing a digital bullseye over the city, and we can watch it happen in real time. When I analyze the geographical footprint of these orbital paths, a stark demographic reality emerges. A 2015 analysis of these flight logs in Baltimore revealed that 84% of these surveillance flights were heavily concentrated over predominantly minority neighborhoods. The dragnet is not cast evenly across the city. It is mathematically targeted. The raw data leaves no room for debate. In these specific urban sectors, home to populations with median incomes nearly 40% below the national average, the skies are saturated with fake cell towers. The analyst logs these coordinates, building a statistical case that proves mass surveillance is disproportionately weaponized against the most vulnerable zip codes. But identifying the flight path is only half the investigation. The analyst extracts the aircraft's unique tail number from the transponder data and runs it through federal aviation registries. The paperwork trail is just as engineered as the radio frequencies. The plane does not belong to the Department of Justice or the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Instead, the registry points to a web of fictitious logistics firms and obscure aerial photography companies. These are corporate shell entities equipped with post office boxes and fake executive boards. They are ghost companies created specifically to purchase aviation fuel, lease hangar space, and operate these airborne dragnets without triggering public oversight. It is a brilliant piece of bureaucratic camouflage. If a journalist or a curious citizen looks up the tail number of the plane circling their house, they see a harmless civilian contractor. I've spent hours clicking through these incorporation documents, noting the identical signatures and overlapping dummy addresses used to register dozens of these aircraft. This is the power of open-source intelligence. The state possesses billions of dollars in classified hardware, but they cannot rewrite the laws of physics or erase the public paper trail required to fly a plane in domestic airspace. By connecting a radio frequency anomaly to a fake corporate address, the civilian analyst single-handedly dismantles a highly classified operation. You are not entirely defenseless in this invisible war. The same mathematical rigidity that the government uses to strip your encryption is the very flaw that exposes their presence in the sky. They must transmit to exist, and as long as they are transmitting, anyone with an internet connection, a cheap radio receiver, and a cynical eye can track their movements. The hardware has been identified. The shell companies have been exposed. The physical evidence of the dragnet is undeniable. But when you take this ironclad data into a court of law expecting accountability, you hit a completely different kind of wall. Because the system has already engineered a legal black hole designed to swallow this exact evidence whole. The physical evidence of the dragnet is undeniable, but the hardware is protected by an impenetrable bureaucratic firewall. Parsing through these municipal court archives, I see the immediate result of this institutional silence. I'm surrounded by stacks of heavily redacted documents. Thick black marker obscures entire pages, leaving only the words "Non-Disclosure Agreement" visible at the top. This is the physical manifestation of a system aggressively erasing its own tracks. You assume the ultimate goal of the justice system is to secure a conviction. You expect that catching a dangerous fugitive is the highest priority for the state. This is a logical, yet entirely false assumption. The evidence sitting on this table proves a terrifying paradox. Law enforcement would rather let a violent criminal walk completely free than admit in open court exactly how they found them. The secrecy of the tool is more valuable than the safety of the public. To acquire these advanced cell site simulators, local police departments must enter into a strict pact with federal authorities. Before a single piece of hardware is shipped, they are forced to sign ironclad non-disclosure agreements authored directly by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is not a standard corporate contract. It is a binding directive that legally subjugates municipal law enforcement to federal secrecy protocols, bypassing all local democratic oversight. These agreements dictate a draconian level of silence. They legally prohibit local prosecutors, detectives, and police chiefs from disclosing the use of the surveillance technology to absolutely anyone. This blanket ban includes defense attorneys, the general public, and, most alarmingly, the presiding judges. The officers sworn to uphold the law are contractually obligated to conceal the fundamental mechanics of their investigations from the magistrates who authorize their warrants. I hold up a police report from a massive narcotics sting, entirely blackened out except for a single date and a forged signature. When a defense attorney asks a detective on the stand how they located a suspect's phone, the detective cannot mention the Dirtbox. Under the severe threat of federal prosecution for violating the non-disclosure agreement, the officer must either evade the direct question or perjure themselves. The legal process becomes an orchestrated theatrical performance. The true weight of this operational secrecy is buried deep in the dismissal dockets of state courts. In multiple documented cases, state prosecutors have actively dropped serious felony charges against armed robbery and assault suspects. They execute this dismissal the exact moment a judge orders them to explain the technical details of the cell site simulator used in the arrest. The state deliberately sabotages its own high-stakes prosecutions to protect the underlying mathematics. Think about the sheer scale of that bureaucratic paranoia. A prosecutor looks at a violent offender, looks at the judge demanding transparency, and chooses to release the suspect back onto the streets. The technology is so constitutionally toxic, so fundamentally incompatible with the Fourth Amendment, that exposing it to judicial scrutiny risks shattering the entire airborne dragnet. The government sacrifices the individual criminal case to protect the invisible infrastructure. To prevent these highly embarrassing dismissals, intelligence agencies birthed a controversial internal doctrine. It is a strict protocol formally known within the intelligence community as parallel construction. The concept is brutally simple and deeply cynical. Agents use the illegal digital intercept from the airborne Dirtbox to pinpoint the target's exact coordinates. But they know they can never present this digital catch to a jury. They desperately need a pristine, conventional alibi. Once the target is located via the invisible radio net, the secondary phase of parallel construction begins. The agents dispatch a patrol car to the exact intersection where they already know the suspect is standing. They instruct the uniformed officers to find a trivial, perfectly legal reason to initiate contact. A broken taillight, jaywalking, a minor noise complaint. The officers execute the stop, discover the suspect, and make the arrest based entirely on this fabricated encounter. The official police report is then meticulously scrubbed of any reference to the airborne surveillance operation. The paper trail presented to the judge claims the arrest was simply the result of exceptional, traditional police work or a remarkably lucky traffic stop. This is a systematic laundering of investigative evidence. Just as criminal cartels launder illicit money through legitimate businesses, the state launders unconstitutional digital surveillance through mundane traffic citations. Sitting in this archive, surrounded by the physical weight of this widespread deception, the reality of the dragnet comes into sharp focus. The non-disclosure agreements do not just protect corporate trade secrets. They protect an ongoing, structural violation of civil liberties. We are witnessing the dark privatization of the justice system. A single federal agency and a handful of defense contractors dictate the rules of evidence for the entire country, operating entirely in the shadows. You rely on the courts to act as a definitive, unyielding check against the absolute power of the state. You assume that if you are ever targeted, the evidence against you will be subjected to rigorous, transparent scrutiny. But parallel construction ensures that the most invasive weapon used against you will never even appear on the official charge sheet. Your digital life is violently extracted, analyzed, and weaponized, all while the legal system politely looks the other way. The firewall holds its ground. The protocols remain highly classified, locked away in municipal vaults just like this one. But the technology itself is not static. It flatly refuses to remain confined to the bellies of circling aircraft or the sterile environment of a laboratory. Driven by the relentless pace of modern microelectronics, the hardware that requires this immense legal protection is rapidly shrinking. The invisible dragnet is descending from the sky, preparing to deploy on foot. The legal firewall we uncovered in the municipal archives was never designed to protect an aircraft forever. That bureaucratic armor was purchased to buy time. Down here at street level, the air is thick with the friction of a massive urban protest. The crowd surges forward, a chaotic sea of physical bodies and broadcasting digital devices. Yet, within this localized chaos, a meticulous protocol is being executed right next to you. I scan the perimeter of the demonstration, filtering the noise to isolate the anomaly. It is not the uniformed riot police holding the barricade. It is the man in plain clothes moving effortlessly against the current of the crowd. He carries an unusually heavy, reinforced backpack. A discreet rubberized antenna barely protrudes from the heavy canvas zipper. He is not a protester. He is a walking cell tower. We are conditioned to look up when we search for the threat. We track the Cessna aircraft executing 2-mile orbits at 10,000 feet. But the physical footprint of surveillance has collapsed. The dragnet that once required a specialized aviation platform, a dedicated pilot, and gallons of aviation fuel now fits comfortably inside a standard civilian backpack. This is the terrifying reality of Moore's law applied to signal interception. The hardware has become invisible by simply blending into the mundane urban uniform. As you stand in this crowd, chanting for transparency, your most intimate communications are being siphoned by the very person bumping into your shoulder. The evidence is entirely spectral, leaving absolutely no paper trail for a defense attorney to follow. Relentless advancements in modern microelectronics have fundamentally rewritten the physics of the intercept. The massive, rack-mounted Dirtbox architecture that previously occupied the rear cabin of a light aircraft has been ruthlessly condensed. The core processors, the signal amplifiers, and the heavy battery arrays are now compressed into portable units the exact size of a standard hardbound book. Do not let the form factor deceive you. This compact, battery-operated unit packs the exact same offensive radio frequency capability as its airborne predecessor. It is a tactical, localized vacuum, designed to slide right through the legal loopholes of the domestic deployment protocol. The undercover operator simply powers it on, walks directly into the target zone, and immediately becomes the sole arbiter of the digital airspace. During periods of mass civil unrest, traditional crowd-control tactics are strictly physical. Tear gas and concrete barricades shape the movement of the physical body. But the man with the backpack is executing a far more sophisticated containment protocol. He is mapping the invisible social graph of the rebellion in real time. As the operative weaves through the densely packed streets, the portable cell site simulator silently forces a digital handshake with every active smartphone in a 3-block radius. It is methodically cataloging the international mobile subscriber identity of every single citizen present at the demonstration. There are no warrants served here. There is only an indiscriminate, silent harvest of the entire physical area. By the time the protest disperses and you return home, your presence at the rally has already been permanently logged in a federal database. You left no physical trace on the street, but your baseband processor testified against you. The authorities now possess a definitive roster of dissent, cross-referenced with your home address, your billing data, and your entire contact list. The investigation reveals that modern miniaturized units have evolved far past the legacy vulnerabilities we analyzed earlier. They no longer rely exclusively on the forced downgrade attack to strip encryption on second-generation networks. The tactical playbook has rapidly expanded from passive data interception to aggressive, localized network manipulation. These advanced backpack models can execute precision, localized denial-of-service attacks. The operator can intentionally flood the radio spectrum, effectively crippling communications for specific target devices within the crowd. While the primary organizer of the protest suddenly finds their device devoid of any signal, the undercover agents standing right next to them maintain crystal-clear transmission. This is the ultimate form of digital crowd suppression. By selectively jamming the leaders and the documentarians, the state controls the flow of information out of the friction zone. They blind the localized network, ensuring that no video is uploaded and no coordinated movement is broadcast. Your device becomes a lifeless brick of glass the exact second you need it most. Yet the most invasive upgrade involves the hardware identification protocol. The latest iteration of these portable simulators actively extracts the unique hardware identifiers, formerly known as Media Access Control or MAC addresses. The unit actively forces the extraction of these alphanumeric signatures from both your cellular modems and your active Wi-Fi transceivers simultaneously. Unlike a phone number or a SIM card, which can be easily swapped or discarded to evade tracking, a media access control address is permanently burned into the physical silicon of your device during manufacturing. By harvesting this specific data, the backpack simulator creates a permanent, immutable digital fingerprint of the target. You cannot change this identifier without physically destroying the hardware itself. The operator reaches the edge of the protest, powers down the unit, and vanishes into the municipal subway system. The intercept is complete, entirely undocumented by the courts, and utterly invisible to the victims. We have mapped the airborne dragnet and exposed its terrestrial evolution. But the final, terrifying truth is that this hardware only functions because our entire modern reality is built upon a mathematically flawed foundation. The screen of the hardened field laptop finally goes black, and the analyst shuts the terminal. The localized intercept is over, but the broader investigation yields a terrifying final verdict. The city skyline is no longer a physical landscape of concrete and glass. In the invisible radio frequency spectrum, millions of glowing digital tethers stretch upward from our pockets, creating a suffocating, inescapable dome over the metropolis. The true architecture is laid bare. I began this case looking for an anomaly in the sky, chasing the shadow of a Cessna flying a 2-mile circular orbit at 10,000 feet. I mapped the airborne dragnet, exposed the corporate front companies, and decoded the non-disclosure agreements that forced local prosecutors to choose silence over justice. But the irrefutable conclusion of this protocol is much darker than a single piece of military hardware deployed against a civilian population. The underlying vulnerability allowing these cell site simulators to function is not a temporary software bug waiting for a security patch. It is a foundational feature of global telecommunications design. The engineers who built the cellular grid prioritized seamless connection over absolute security. As long as our devices are programmed to aggressively seek and bind to the strongest available transmission power, they will remain inherently vulnerable to malicious impersonation. You are carrying a tracking device that is mathematically incapable of loyalty. It does not care if the interrogation signal comes from a legitimate carrier tower, an unmarked aircraft, or a tactical backpack hidden in a subway crowd. It is permanently hard-coded to broadcast your international mobile subscriber identity and your precise coordinates 24 hours a day. You handed your digital life to a protocol that blindly trusts authority without verifying its identity. Do not take comfort in the illusion of advanced encryption or fifth-generation upgrades. I proved that the downgrade attack forcefully strips away modern mutual authentication, throwing your hardware back to the unsecured standards of the 1990s. Your text messages, your location data, and the permanent hardware signature of your device are extracted in fractions of a second, leaving zero forensic trace on your screen. The crime scene is completely invisible. You traded the sanctuary of absolute privacy for the convenience of seamless connectivity, and my final verdict confirms this contract is permanently binding. The Dirtbox operating in the clouds is merely the most visible symptom of a society that has voluntarily digitized its entire existence. We built a world where participation in modern life requires carrying a beacon that constantly screams its existence into the void, begging to be cataloged by any ghost node. This is the absolute asymmetry of the modern surveillance state. The architecture ensures that those with the right hardware operate in total darkness, while the rest of us are illuminated on a tactical grid. I documented how 84% of these airborne deployments systematically target marginalized neighborhoods, proving that this invisible net is cast over the most vulnerable among us, while remaining shielded by federal bureaucracy and parallel construction. The investigation is officially closed, but the case remains a permanent fixture of our reality. There is no patch to download, no setting to toggle, and no hardware switch that can reverse the fundamental mathematics of the cellular network. Short of destroying the silicon inside your phone and stepping entirely off the grid, you cannot hide from the baseline frequency of the modern world. You are a node in a network specifically designed to harvest you. I observed this system through the cynical lens of an intelligence analyst, tracking the digital ghosts in the machine. But that avatar is no longer necessary, because the target of this dragnet is not an abstract data point. It is you. Every time you cross a city block, every time you send a private text message, you are feeding the exact dragnet I just exposed. Ignorance of this architecture is no longer a valid defense mechanism against the surveillance state. My objective was to dismantle the illusion of digital privacy and hand you the raw, unredacted schematic of the world you actually inhabit. If this investigation shifted your perspective and provided the tactical awareness you need to navigate the grid, hit the subscribe button. I will continue pulling the classified architecture out of the shadows, and I need you in the network to help analyze the next breach. Your awareness is the only real defense we have left. The digital tether connecting you to the sky cannot be severed, but you no longer have to look at the ceiling in complete blindness. You now understand the uncompromising mathematics of the machine, the cold logic of the intercept, and the heavy price of being connected in the 21st century. Keep your eyes on the horizon, question the signals you cannot see, and never trust a network you do not control. The case is closed. Signing off.